My Hey Teves. What exactly is the significance of this day? We know for sure the Rebbe's aggravation, and we know that he went to the oil every day when the case was being argued in court. And then, of course, the Simcha, and every year after that, Hey Teves became this established Yom Tov that the Rebbe would speak about and say, the Dan Notzach, what we have, we are victorious, and the victory is what? The victory of the Sfarim, the victory of the Rebbe, that and celebrated through studying in these Sfarim, through buying Sfarim, and through learning Torah in that fashion. So many people ask the question, what exactly is the significance of this? Yitas Kislev, we've been told that it was a kitrig. We're told it's a kitrig, as I mentioned before, in heaven against the revelation of Chassidus. And the release of the Alter Rebbe in Tov Kuf Nun Tes was a statement from heaven that you're doing the right thing, and not only that, you should continue even further. We know other Yom Tevim, each one has their significance and their message to us. Whether it's the Yom Tevim Al Pitera, the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, whether it's Chanukah and Purim that we're coming from, and so we have their explanation. But you see, even with Chanukah, the Gemara has a whole sugya that discusses my Chanukah. Because if you didn't have that Gemara, you could say, what exactly was Chanukah? Chanukah was, we know, a battle with the Greeks. A war was won. Maybe that's what Chanukah is. And the Gemara has to tell us, no. The main focus of Chanukah was that the Timu Shmonim, Kol HaShmonim Shebehechel, that they desecrated, defiled all the oils in the temple. And then then they've discovered, finally, after winning the war, they discovered one vial, one crucible, one pach shemen. And with that was only a power, that was one miracle. The second miracle, that one pach, which only had the ability to naturally burn one day, burned for 8 days until they were able to actually press and manufacture new oil, new pure oil. So the Gemara tells us, my Chanukah, what is my Hey Teves? We know the story. The story is that, yes, a grandson of the Frierdiker Rebbe, his only grandson, born to the Chana, the Frierdiker Rebbe's oldest daughter, Chana, and her husband, the Rashag of Shmayahu Gerari, went approximately in the Tafshim Mem Hey. This would be approximately in the year 1985 at some point, and began taking books from the Frierdiker Rebbe's library and selling it in the market. News came back and was found out, and they put up cameras and they changed the locks. The bottom line is, first the Rebbe tried behind the scenes to try to resolve this. That didn't work, so it became a public thing. The Rebbe, Yud Beis Tammuz, the 12th of Tammuz, and then Tezvav Tammuz. That year, 1985, the Rebbe spoke about it in public in very, very strong words. We don't have the time to go through all the Rebbe's talks, but suffice it to say, it was very sharp and harsh. We literally said that the selling of these books in the public market is creating a new levaya, another funeral of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And they're seeing the Frierdiker Rebbe as something from the past, and now they're selling off the books, which is taking pieces of his life and selling it off. These were paraphrasing the Rebbe's strong terms, and it was even stronger than what I'm saying. Okay. As a result, Agudas Chabad, which is the official legal entity that the Frierdiker Rebbe established and continued in the later years, took Barry Gerari to court about these books. Many of these books were retrieved. Most of them, or all of them, were retrieved. Some were already sold, some were not. And they took to court, and the basic disagreement was, he claimed he's a grandson, his mother is an heir, his aunt as well as an heir, the Rebbe's Rebbetzin, Chaim Mushka, as an heir, he's the rightful right. He's a rightful owner and heir to these books. And that's what he's doing, selling these books. The Agudas Chabad argument was, no, it's not any private property of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It belongs to the body called Chassidus Chabad. And there was an argument back and forth, and Agudas Chassidus Chabad prevailed. So you could argue, okay, it was a sad chapter, you have to fight over it. You won the battle, fine. So what's the Yom Tov here? What's the big Yom Tov here? That he shouldn't steal books? So okay. You could see one time as a Yom Tov they won, but the Rebbe made it something that's permanent. It's a permanent Yom Tov. 30 years later now, we still remember it. All these characters, the Barry Gerari is not here. And all the people that worked with him are not here. And all that, the case is over. So what's the Yom Tov exactly? So I want to address it in a succinct and summarized way, as much as one can summarize, because it's critical that we understand Even if, you say it doesn't matter, I don't understand. The Rebbe says a yontif, it's a yontif. But it's always best to understand the significance of it, and then, of course, knowing how to celebrate it properly and honor it in the right way. So let's just use an example. Imagine the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu, at some point, comes and says, listen, my grandfather Moshe was the one that received the Torah from Sinai, and therefore I'm his heir. So I want you to pay me royalties, let's say, for the books you're learning, the Torah you're learning, or some of them I want to sell to the marketplace, to the larger market. Now, obviously, most of us would see that as ludicrous. Why? Because the Torah doesn't belong to Moshe, and therefore it belongs to his heirs. The Torah is Torah Hashem, it's God's Torah. Moshe was the delivered it. Yishalakim. Now, I'm not saying this is even a Havamim anyone would think, but just that would be the same scenario here. So the books of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the real issue is, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a collection of books of an individual? And that was the argument. Barry Gerardi argued that this is a personal property of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He was a Rebbe, but he was also a private citizen, had private property. Agudas Chabad argued, no. The Rebbe is simply a caretaker, so to speak, of the Chassidim's wishes. Interesting, Sifton, the judge, rejected both these arguments. And he accepted what the Rebbetzin said, and the Rebbe quoted Mitzvah Shabbos Tetzaveh that year, the year Memches, after the Rebbetzin passed away, and the Rebbe said, was it Tetzaveh? Truma? If I'm mistaken, but it's one of those weeks, Mitzvah Shabbos. And the Rebbe said that in the Sikh B'Yei Nachshur V'Cheshbein Shel that this was a key component in the case, which was what? That the Rebbe, when they asked her at the end of her deposition, so who did the books of your father belong to? The Frierdiker Rebbe's books. To your father or to the Chassidim? So she said the Rebbe himself belongs to Chassidim. Exactly like Moshe Rabbeinu. We're not talking about individual people that have inheritances. As the Rebbe then wrote in a note to the lawyers to use this argument, a Rebbe himself is Messias, is Bittul Hayesh. His whole thing belongs to Chassidim. So there's no concept of private property. So it's not just he's a caretaker, and because the Chassidim gave the Rebbe money and they trust him, therefore the Rebbe his children can't come and take it. Because technically speaking, without the case, you could say, listen, you trust the Rebbe wants to give it to his children. It's beyond that. A Rebbe is one thing with Torah, and Torah is one thing with the Rebbe, and there's a certain eternity to it. Just like you say, Tzibur Ein a mess, there's an eternity to it. So what essentially the Judge Sifton, the non-Jewish judge in a federal court established for the first time the legal definition of a Rebbe, that a Rebbe is not a private citizen, that a Rebbe, and therefore also anything that is part of what he has connection with, his books and his manuscripts and his library, belong to an entity that can never be sold, not even by the entity, because it's an eternal belonging to the Jewish people, to the Chassidic Chabad, and as such, that's its a legal status. So if you think of it from that perspective, it wasn't just a matter of fighting a battle and winning over whether Bar Gerari has any right to it. It's establishing something that we can appreciate today even more than then. That the Rebbe and everything he teaches is something that is subject to personal property and therefore not subject to just mortality, if you want to put it that way. It lives on forever. The Torah lives on forever because it's Torah Hashem, a Torah Nitzchi, and therefore we honor and celebrate that. So if you think of it that way, Hey Teves established that in the legal terms. As the judge writes in his opening of his ruling, he writes, up till the 20th century, there was no need to establish the relationship between a Rebbe, his property, or his books, his library, and Chassidim. It was total trust living in the old world and the old shtetl and so on. Frierdiker Rebbe, in his visionary, in his wisdom and foresight, realized that we're going a new world, and that's why he incorporated Agudas Chabad and realized the need to make this a legal entity that defines what is Chassidus. Chassidus is not an individual, as I said, tzibur, and a tzibur ain't a mess, and that is essentially was ratified in Hey Teves. Up till Hey Teves, had he not taken the books, we would never know. You could always argue, who knows what exactly this is legally. So here, on the contrary, Hey Teves became a celebration because we now know forever that a Rebbe, and a non-nafsik sovis yovis, and the Rebbe's soul, which is manifest where? In his Torah, that lives on forever. That's Hey Teves. So if you think of it, Hey Teves is a critical holiday for our times, especially after Gimel Tammuz. And you can't help but think, maybe the whole Hey Teves was in order for us to have that strength and power to know this message today. The Alter Rebbe writes in Excerpt that the Chaim of a Tzaddik, the life of a Tzaddik, is not Chaim Psadim. It's not life of flesh and blood. It's Chaim Ruchnim. It's a life of love and awe and faith in God. And that lives on forever because that's never been limited. It's never been defined by a body. When the Rebbe Rashab said, Ir gein Himmel und ksovim lo zechaych, and the Rebbe cites this, and cites it in the context of this case as well. He says, why did the Rebbe Rashab have to put it in such almost jolting words? And it did jolt the family, including the Frierdiker Rebbe, as we know what happened at the time when he said it. I'm going to heaven, and the writings I leave to you. He asked that they bring his bed into the Beis Medrash, where he would say his Maimorim Chassidus, and he would fabreng. And he said those words. The Rebbe explains, on the contrary, he wasn't trying to frighten anyone. He was saying, Ir gein Himmel. You want to have me in heaven, you have me through my writings, because just like an Eibishter, God places himself, Anon Nafshik Sovis Yehovis. Anoichi, the first word in the Ten Commandments, is an acronym, the Talmud says. I have instilled myself, I have embedded myself in my soul in these words, Anon Nafshik Sovis Yehovis, and that I've given to you. Same thing at Tzaddik embeds himself in his words in Torah. And that's why the Rebbe said it's another funeral when you sell these books. And that they're challenging the very truth and permanence of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, on the contrary, they think, it says some Rebbe today, they think that it was a funeral and histalkus that happened 35 years ago. And every day that goes further from that, we're farther away. And every time you sell the book, you're basically taking a piece of him, because that's what the Rebbe is. That's why the Frierdiker Rebbe refused to leave Russia, the former Soviet Union, without the books. It wasn't just some adamance or some abstinence, God forbid. Because for the Rebbe and his Sfarim are one. For him to leave without the books, like leaving without half of himself, without his soul, without his whole, the presence of all the Rabbeim and all that the Ksovim and manuscripts and the Sfarim they learned in and the Sfarim that they gathered and so on. And it wasn't about a collector's item. But Rebbe Frierdiker Rebbe, the library was not just a museum of collecting, a library of collecting books. This is what a Rebbe is. Teira. Moshe, Zichru Teiris Moshe Avdi, Shekiva Shemosa Nafshe Allah. This is one and the same thing. And therefore, the mere concept of turning that into a private property, including private property of the Rebbe even mentioned that it's no one's private property, is sacrilegious to the whole concept of what a Rebbe and Nitzchis is and the Rebbe and his Torah, which are all one. So I hope I did some type of justice to this important day, critical day, and above all, it's today, no question, more important than ever before, because this is what we live with. And that's why, how do we honor Hey Teves? By learning in these Sfarim, by being active, poil, as the Rebbe said, being active with the spreading of Chassidus. Which is perhaps why the Rebbe, of course, Chanukah comes in between Hey Teves and Yutes Kislev. The Rebbe spoke in that year, in 1985 and 86 and 87 as well, and it's 30 years ago, how Chassidus was a challenge on Chassidus in Alter Rebbe's times. And now the challenge, I would phrase it this way, it was not a challenge like it was by the Alter Rebbe. Here is a challenge on the eternity of it, on the nitzchis of it. Does it live on? And in Magdim Refuah Lamaka, perhaps, that the healing, the cure precedes the illness, the challenge, that now someone say something has died, something has in some way weakened. Absolutely not. We may not see it, but the nitzchis of a Rebbe lives on, and it lives on through his Sfarim, and his Sfarim remain the Torah. That when you learn the Rebbe's Torah, you're learning the Rebbe himself, because that's where he instilled his soul. The same with anyone that's Torah that you learn. So in that sense, that really identifies what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is bittel, und bittel wird nicht bottel. Bittel cannot ever disappear. So if you look with physical eyes and physical flesh and blood, you see one thing. Hey Teves established not what's physical. And what's most amazing is that this is a judge who never learned Chassidus, who's not even Jewish, picked it up and understood it, a subtle thing like that, that the Rebbe is different than every other entity. Because he did not accept the argument that he's a private citizen. He didn't accept the argument he's a caretaker. He's another type of reality. There's no one like that in the world. A president, Lahavdil, of the United States, a leader of a country, a head of a company, even if they own the company, So either they own it, so it's theirs, private property, or if they're caretaker in a sense of a non-profit, so they're the steward, or a president is a private citizen after he leaves the president. The concept of a Rebbe being completely, as the Rebbe said, belonging to Chassidim, and therefore him, his Sfarim, his Torah are all one, something public, that is Torah and Torah's Meisha. So just as Torah's Meisha lives on today, and it was never given over to any type of family members or heirs, but everybody owns it in that sense, or better put, nobody owns it, because it's only God owns it. The same thing as Chassidus, which was also given at Har Sinai. It was only revealed to us in its time, just like Torah Shabbal Peh was revealed to us in its time. The Gemara, Chassidus was revealed with the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, the Alter Rebbe, and so on. So Hey Teves established that in a most formal and legal way, and that's what we honor and celebrate. So it's quite amazing if you think about it and its power and its lesson to us in our lives.